Great Scott!
Are you a sports fan who loves to have a good laugh?
Oh, yeah!
Then you're in the right place.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
Life moves pretty fast.
Patriots win the
Welcome
Super Bowl!
to the Man Cave Chronicles.
Brady has his fifth!
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles podcast, a podcast of talk culture where everyone has a story. I am your host, Elias, and you can find me on Twitter at the MCC Podcast. My guest this week, you've seen her on Stranger Things, Timeless, Jennifer Marshall. Jennifer, welcome to the Cave.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
What's going on with you?
Oh gosh, it's been really busy. Yeah, it's been crazy. So it was pretty slow for a few months, and then this week I booked 2 TV shows, and so I'm booked up for the next 10 days.
That's
but
awesome.
before that, it was literally crickets. So you never know.
Yeah, that's the business, right?
Yeah, totally is.
So, I want to tell the listeners the reason I reached out to you is I think your story is great and your background is great, and I want the listeners to get to know you, the real you. So, where are you originally from?
I am from Carbondale, Colorado. And at the time that I lived there, it had like 3,000 people and 1 stoplight. And now I think it has 3 stoplights. So, yeah, it's a really small town in the mountains.
Yeah. How was it growing up there?
I moved there in high school, and it's beautiful, but when you're in high school, you're not really focused on things that are beautiful. You want things to do. So
Yeah.
It was really, really boring. So I know that a lot of people would go cow tipping on the weekends. And there was a lot of underage drinking and a lot of partying in the forest. And I was just like, I have to get out of here. This is not my future.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
I read online that you were busy also. You're playing basketball and cheerleader, and was it a drama team? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I was. I was super, super busy. I really didn't want to get wrapped up in anything that could possibly derail my future. So anything that there was at the high school, I did it. I played basketball. I was a cheerleader for the football team. I was in speech and drama. I did musical theater. I was part of Health Occupation Students of America. I was the vice president for Colorado, actually, when I was a senior. So I was very, very active in anything to just stay out of trouble.
Yeah. Did you sleep at all? Jeez.
I slept very, very little. I
Yeah.
actually worked as a nursing assistant as well.
Wow.
And so I was just a workhorse, and I've been that way my whole life, and I think that it keeps me sane.
Yeah. So after high school, you joined the Navy. What made you decide to join the Navy?
I always knew that I was going to go into some branch of the military. It was something that I come from a family full of veterans, and generations and generations full of veterans. So I knew that I was going to join some branch, and the Navy recruiter got to me first. So it was literally whatever recruiter called me first. He called me first. I went down and enlisted, and I left 5 weeks after graduation.
Wow. So how was your time in the Navy?
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. It was so, so wonderful. I'm actually in the process. You're the first person publicly that I've told, but I'm actually in the process of trying to go back into the Navy Reserves.
Really?
So yes, I have missed it so dearly, and I finally got to a point where I'm kind of aging out, and I thought I really have to do this now or never. I have just missed it so dearly, and it shaped who I am, and I just thought, why not? Why not do it? So I'm in the process right now of trying to do that. We'll see how it turns out.
How was boot camp when you went to boot camp?
I was a student athlete, so boot camp was not physically difficult for me. What was really, really hard for me was, I'm trying to think of a way to put this. It was difficult being with some of the other women because there's such a stigma already of females in the military. And so we have to work harder than men just to be accepted. And so there were some females that, it was difficult for them because they were smaller. I'm just genetically blessed and biologically blessed because I'm a very large female. So for some of the smaller females who are 5 feet 1 inch, that's really difficult. So it was very, very hard for me to to work with some of these females and work with the males and try to explain to them that, yes, even though biologically there may be a difference in muscle mass and what they can bring to the table that way, there's other things that females bring to the table that males don't necessarily bring. So that was always hard dealing with gender in the military. That's always a difficult issue. And I think in the last, 15, 20 years, things have changed a lot for the better.
Yeah. When I did my research on you, I noticed that you worked your butt off. You're an aircraft handler, forklift operator. You did repairs also.
I did.
Yeah.
I did anything that they said, hey, we've got this school that you can go to, we've got this certification, this training. I've always been that way as far as, if I can work 24/7, I don't have to think about anything else.
Yeah.
So I was an aircraft handler when I first came in. I was undesignated, which is basically you don't have a job. I had wanted to be a corpsman, but at the time they had too many females who were in those slots. So they said you can go in undesignated, and when a position opens up, you can take one. That's unfortunately not how it worked out. So I was sent to my first command undesignated, and so I was placed at an air terminal where I worked as an aircraft handler. That's where I got my forklift license. I soon moved into logistics, and then when I went to the aviation side of logistics, and then when I went to my first ship, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, I worked in aviation logistics there, and I also worked on the ship security defense force and then on the repair locker fire team. Wow. And I was one of the only females in on the defense force and also on the fire team, because they're very physically demanding jobs, and there just weren't a lot of women in those positions then.
Do you have a favorite moment in your 5 years in the Navy?
I do. So I had applied for the United States Naval Academy in 2000. I had never thought about going to college. It was something that was not in the cards for me. I never even thought I would graduate from college. I never thought I'd graduate from high school, let alone college. So after about 18 months in the Navy, I was junior sailor of the quarter, and I had decided to apply for the Naval Academy. I had taken my ACT, and I realized that my test scores were too low to get into the Naval Academy. At the time, it was the 8th hardest college in the nation to get into. And I realized my scores were just too low. Everyone who graduates from the Naval Academy graduates with a Bachelor of Science degree, and I knew that I couldn't pass the physics, the chemistry, the trigonometry classes that were required. So I applied, and I kind of abandoned that. And what happened several months later was I found out that I was granted entrance to the Naval Academy. So I had found this out, and I had no idea. They had offered me a spot at the preparatory school because my scores were low, but they were lower than what an average high school student would have. And so I remember standing in the forecastle, which is a part of the ship where they do award ceremonies. And I remember receiving my acceptance to the United States Naval Academy Preparatory School. And I remember just thinking, there's no way that this could happen to me. Like, how is this possible? I barely got out of high school, and this is happening to me. Mm-hmm. And I ended up not going to the Naval Academy for other reasons, but just to be accepted was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, if you work for something hard in your life, you deserve it, Yeah,
and I thought that the effort was there and the work ethic was there, but scores wise, I just didn't have them. And I later found out that I had a master chief who was at the Naval Academy at that time, who was a female, and she had just advocated for me mercilessly in front of the board and said, I understand her math scores are lower than what we require out of our high school students, but this woman is junior sailor of the quarter, and she's done all of these things at her command, and she's already proven herself in the Navy. And you're telling me that she's not granted entrance because of her math scores, that she can improve, but yet you're willing to allow all of these high school students who have not proved themselves admission? And so she really advocated strongly for me. And I felt bad when things worked out that I didn't attend, because I felt like I let her down. But life has a funny way of kind of throwing curveballs at you that direct you in another direction.
So after you finished the Navy, did you go to college?
I did. I left the Navy, and I graduated from Virginia Wesleyan University. I have a double bachelor's in international studies and Spanish with a minor in history. And then I finished my master's at American Military University with administration of justice.
Yeah. So from there, how did you wake up one day, I want to go into acting?
It was not a thing. Everybody I talk to says, I wanted to be an actor from the time I was young. That was never a thing with me. It was something other people did. I actually got into it when I was attending community college after I got out of the Navy. I was in a musical theater group on base, and we were just, doing some local community theater. And I saw a guy who was in my group, and he was on TV, and I asked him, hey, how'd you get on TV? And he said, I take classes at this local place. And so I started taking classes at the acting studio, and my first audition was 2 weeks into my classes. And I booked that audition. And so ever since then, I've just been very, very fortunate to have been booking since then.
Yeah. Did you, what was your first thing that you got?
The first thing that I got was a thesis film at Regent University, and it was a filmmaker who was in the master's program. And he actually, I believe he got, I don't want to say kicked out from Regent University is a very Christian school. So I believe he was asked to leave because he did his thesis film on demonic possession, which is something that, we all watch horror movies, but in a Christian school, that's not really something that they appreciate. So I do believe that they probably asked him to leave, to pick another subject or to leave. But that's not easy, playing somebody who has issues with believing she's possessed. So it was definitely a very strenuous shoot, and I'm happy that I did it, but I don't know what happened. I don't believe that he finished the program because it was a difference of opinion between him and the faculty.
So you did some commercials as well, right?
I did a ton of commercials when I was still in Virginia. I did a ton of commercials, and I've done some since I've been in Los Angeles too. And it got to the point when I was in Norfolk where I had done, I think at the time I had four commercials airing. I had shot all of the television shows that were there, and I had done so many training films at this one particular studio that they said, we can't use Jennifer anymore because we've used her in a lot of training films. So I'd kind of saturated that very, very small market. And I told my husband, I said, I know that you don't like Los Angeles, but I don't have a career here. I don't have anything else to do. It's a non-union market. I'm never going to be a working actor just being non-union. And I've been here this whole time for you, and you really need to think about moving. And he said, it's expensive there, and the traffic, and it's horrible. And I said, I'm going to go with you or without you. And that was very much a bluff, very much a bluff. But thankfully he bought the bluff. Yeah. And so we moved, and I've been here since 2011. I took about a year and a half respite for other things, but I started back up acting in 2013, and I've been in Los Angeles hitting it pretty hard since 2013.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier in the episode that listeners probably know you from Stranger Things season 2 as Susan Hargrove, Max's mom. How did you get the opportunity to audition for something like that?
Well, I have an agent in Atlanta, and I fly very frequently to Atlanta. I work pretty frequently in Atlanta, and the girl who plays my daughter, Sadie Sink, she's amazing and wonderful and extremely talented. She's, redheaded. She's very clearly redheaded. So when they were looking for the mother, they were looking for someone that matched her very closely. So I was a fan of her work when she did a show called American Odyssey. I remember watching this show and watching Sadie and thinking, what a talented young actress. So when the casting notice came out, it said, we're looking for someone to play her mother. And I thought, gosh, I knew off the bat, if I have a decent audition, I have a very good shot at this role because we look very similar. And I remember pulling up a picture of her and putting it side by side, and my husband looked at it and he just laughed because the similarity, it's very strong. And so my husband and I went through the scene a few times because I have a self-tape studio at home that I do a lot of my audition tapes from. And my poor husband it was the scene that I auditioned with was the scene where Billy and Neil are fighting.
Okay.
And so my husband is literally trying to be Billy and Neil and run the camera and, make like the slapping sound when Neil pushes Billy into the shelf, and he's trying to yell as Neil, and he's literally like a circus behind the camera. It was incredibly funny in retrospect. And I shot the audition and I sent it off, and I got a notification back that I was pinned. So basically, whatever actors they think it's possible may book this role, they will pin you. So they will say, please don't book anything else. Don't book a vacation. Don't go anywhere during this time period. And we will tell you if you're booked as soon as we know. So as soon as they get clearance from Sean Levy and the Duffer Brothers, they'll say, yes, we want to book you, or no, you're released. So I got notification within a week, I'd say, that I was booked. And shortly after that, I went out to Atlanta to film.
Wow. Did you, were you a fan of Stranger Things?
Oh my gosh. This is what happened. I remember that summer, the first summer it came out, I opened up Facebook and it was all over Facebook, and I didn't know what this was, but everybody had said, watching Stranger Things. And I told my husband, I said, what is this? Because we really didn't want to get sucked into any other programming. It's just TV is such a time suck, and we have so many things going on. We have kids. I was in school, all this stuff, and everybody was talking about it, and I didn't want to be that actor who really didn't know. And then somebody had said it's set in the 80s, and I said, okay, I'm sold. So we binged it over probably 3 days. I fell in love with it. It was so great, the storytelling and the nostalgia, and I grew up during the 80s, so I just loved it. And so when I got the opportunity to audition, it was really exciting. I mean, I auditioned for probably 2 or 3 things a week, but this was definitely an audition that stood out. And I did not realize at the time how important Max's character was. I just thought maybe she was like a periphery character. I didn't realize she was a new series regular on the show. So, and I didn't realize I knew that I had booked Stranger Things. I knew that I had shot Stranger Things, but I didn't realize the gravity of it until a few days after the season premiered. And then all of the feedback I got, it was like, wow, it was surreal. It was like, wow, I'm on Stranger Things. How does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it was with my wife too. People were talking about it, and then I saw the little tease trailer for it. And it's like, it takes place in the 80s, and I'm just like you. I grew up in the 80s, and I'm like, oh, and I gotta watch this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's just a great great way to reminisce.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your character and how did you prepare for it?
Well, Susan is so unlike Jennifer, and it's funny because I end up booking a good amount of characters that are similar to Susan. So wallflowers, or kind of weak-willed, don't want to speak up, abused by their husbands. Which I find a little bit strange because I am so tall. I'm almost 6 feet tall, and I'm pretty bold in real life, and I'm a pretty strong woman. So to book these characters, it's always surprising to me when I book them. But I think with Susan and like other characters like her that I book, I always have to write an end story to them. Otherwise, it's very hard and unpalatable for me to play women like that. It's very hard for me to play a woman who is subservient to her husband, or a woman that allows her husband to treat the children like that. Yeah. So I always have to write an end story, and I don't know Susan's end story. Only, Matt and Ross and Sean know her end story, but I have to write that. And so when I get this character, I write all of the adjectives that I associate with this character, and I write a backstory, and I wrote how she met Neil, and what she thought of Billy, and how she met Max's father, and what happened. And all of these things aren't even necessarily what Matt and Ross, how they have developed the character, but it's just what I needed to do to audition. So I did it before I auditioned, and then I added to the character before I went and shot. And so basically anything I would want to know about Jennifer, I put on this piece of paper about Susan. So I think I probably have 5 or 6 pieces of paper with no white space left on them, all about Susan. Yeah. And who knows how much of it is actually true. If I were to show it to Matt and Ross, they'd probably be like, whoa, you're way off.
How was it working with the cast?
Oh, it was great. It was so good. It was by far the best set I've ever been on. There are two sets in recent memory where I've just been blown away, and this was one of them. And I've been on hundreds of sets in my career, and there's just something so wonderful. And I especially love shooting in the South because it's much different than shooting in Los Angeles. It's a little bit slower paced. It's a lot more polite. And I just really like shooting in the South. I miss the South after living in Virginia for so long. I loved shooting on that set, and I loved working with Matt and Ross because some directors are very hands-off. they're very hands-on. They come and talk to the talent. They tell us exactly what they're thinking. They asked for your input. They tell us exactly what they need. And I work with some directors, they're hands-off. They don't talk to the talent. They don't tell you what they need. They don't tell you what they're thinking. They just say, do your thing. Yeah. I much prefer how Matt and Ross are. I much prefer to talk to the directors and have collaborative filmmaking. And so for me, it was a dream come true.
Do you have like fans recognizing you after being on Stranger Things?
It's funny because what most people recognize me for is I used to be a spokesperson for a mortgage company called New Day USA that specializes in veteran mortgages. And so that particular commercial aired on Fox, MSNBC, and CNN about 10 to 15 times a day. So people would recognize me from that, or people would recognize me from my advocacy work with the nonprofit Pinups for Vets, where we dress up as World War II era pinup girls and visit veterans in hospitals and nursing homes and wounded warrior detachments. People would mainly recognize me from there. I look so different from Susan in real life that I don't get a lot of that, but it has happened occasionally. I was actually on set in Canada, and catering walked up to me and he said, "This is such a weird question, and I'm sorry if this is creeper, but are you on Stranger Things?" And I think it was just because he had just finished watching that episode or something. And I just laughed and I said, yes. And he said, "Do you want to take a picture?" And I said, "Yes, of course." Now, most of the people who recognize me are people who, like when I'm out with Gina, who is the founder of Pinups for Vets. It's funny because she'll tell people she's on Stranger Things because she knows it makes people happy. And it makes me so happy to make people happy because they want to take a picture or they want me to like call their friend who's a huge fan or call their child. And I love doing that. If I can make a video for their child or call someone or take a photo, that for me just makes my day to make someone happy.
That's great. Well, I mentioned before you were on Timeless. I think that show is fantastic, and it's too bad, it keeps getting canceled and it comes back and it got canceled again, and now they're going to do like a 2-part thing. How was it being on that show?
So Timeless was wonderful. I was so excited to hear that we get the series finale. Oh, I was so happy. So I had not watched Timeless, and I was completing my second son's adoption. So I was out of Los Angeles, and so I received the audition notice to tape for Timeless. So I taped the audition, I sent it, and then I had ended up getting cast. I went and filmed, and then after I filmed, I started watching the show. Thank goodness it happened in that order because I became such a fangirl. Yeah. And I would never want to be on a set and be a fangirl because it's not professional. But I became literally such a fangirl. I love Timeless. I watched every episode. Unfortunately, a lot of my footage got cut from the episode, which is fine. I never take that personally as an actor because sometimes it's storyline related, it's editor, you never know. And when we were filming, the way that my lines were, I knew that it wasn't conducive to making the final edit, which was fine because I just loved working on the show. And I love Abigail Spencer's amazing, and I loved working with Guy Ferland. Everything was great and everyone was wonderful. Yeah. But to work on such a show that has such an impact, because the show's based in history and kids love it. It's a show you can watch with your kids. It's a show that teachers loved. And even though it only lasted for 2 seasons, it's a show that really had cultural significance. And I was so blessed to be a part of it.
It's actually like an addicting show once you start watching it.
Oh, yes. I loved it so much.
Who are like some of your influences in the acting world?
It's funny. I'm going to give you an answer that other people probably don't give, because I understand it's the chic thing as an actor to say Meryl Streep and Bobby De Niro. And although I look at actors like that, like Meryl Streep is amazing. I could never even imagine to be a tenth of her talent. A lot of the actors that I look up to are other veterans who entered this business and have done really well for themselves. Okay. There's an actor named Tucker Smallwood who I love dearly, and he's a dear friend of mine. He was in Contact with Jodie Foster. He's been in so many things. If you look him up on IMDb, you'll see his face and say, "Oh my gosh, yes, of course, Tucker. He's been in so many things." And Tucker was in Vietnam, and he was very badly injured in Vietnam. And when he came back, he went into acting, and he's done so well for himself. And he has spoken out publicly about post-traumatic stress and about veterans getting help. And he's really been an advocate for those veterans. So to me, to be a veteran and be an actor and continue to give back to that community, I have so much respect for that. Wow. So Tucker, another person who I look up to dearly, is John Huertas, who plays Miguel on This Is Us. Okay. John was in the Air Force. I actually won a mentorship with John probably about 4 years ago, and I went to Castle. He was on set. He was a series reg on Castle. And I went for a day, and we talked about career plans and what I should be doing and where I should be going. And he took a few hours of his day and devoted it to me to help another veteran get ahead. And those are the people that I look up to, are vets in the community who are now successful in what they're doing in acting, and they give back to other vets.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you want to tell the listeners about?
I do. So I have a 4-part series, and I'm in the 4th movie, and it's called Texas Zombie Wars, and it's very Walking Dead-ish, and that will be coming out on Netflix very soon. I also have, oh gosh, I wish I could tell you about the latest thing I just booked. Oh, but I can't. So I just booked something really great that'll be coming out next year. I have a video game that's coming out next year that's called Squadron 42, and it's part of the Star Citizen universe. It's been in development for like 3 years now, so I know a lot of people have been waiting on that. I have a small part in a movie with Kumail Nanjiani coming out next year called Stuber, and I have a small part in A Dog's Way Home that's coming out next year, which is a sequel to A Dog's Purpose. So a lot of things coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. So you're keeping busy. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'm keeping busy, but you know, it was literally crickets for months, and now it's starting to speed up again. So you never.
It's like that in the podcast world too. You know, when I reach out for people to get on, you know, sometimes you go through this little slow phase where, you know, people just have projects going on and they can't come on, and there's all of a sudden you're trying to schedule everybody all in at once.
I'm sure. People are on vacation
with a full-time job and kids and a wife too.
Yeah.
How can the listeners find you on social media?
Okay, so I love to talk to people on social media. I know some people, they just put pictures up and they never talk to people. I feel like that's so lame. It's social for a reason. So definitely let's talk on social media. Instagram, Jen13, that's JENN13, JENN13. Facebook is facebook.com/actress Jennifer Marshall. I do a lot of Facebook Lives on there. And then you can check out my website, jennifermarshall.com. It's got a lot of information about some nonprofits that I support and the charity work that I do.
I want to personally thank you for coming on. This was a blast.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you so much.